Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. I say afternoon, it's afternoon here in London, might be even early evening wherever you are. My name's Ross Gill. I'm a trustee of the BEARR Trust and also one of the assessors for the small grant scheme that we run every year. And we thought that we would put this webinar together today to give you an introduction to the scheme, explain what this year's topic is about, give some hints on how you can put together a good application, an application that we might be keen to support, and also to enable you to hear from some recent beneficiaries of the BEARR Trust grant scheme who can give their perspective on what they've done and how they found the process. So just to start off with, I'm going to speak in English during this presentation. But there is translation facilities available via that symbol at the bottom of the screen. So please use that. If you have any difficulty with any of that or hearing people at any point, put it in the chat and somebody can pick that up. Likewise, if any of the speakers are speaking in Russian later on, if you want to listen in English, you can choose the English option and hear that. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by a number of BEARR trustees and BEARR staff as well, who'll be able to answer questions that you might have on the process. And also, in particular, Tatiana Roskovan from TAUR in Moldova and Natalia Kuchtin from Winds of Change in Ukraine, who will be talking about their perspectives on the scheme. But what I'm going to do first is just give you a bit of a background to the small grant scheme and just to introduce that to you. So back in 2006, so quite a while ago now, BEARR launched its small grant scheme. And the idea of this was to provide small scale, what we've called seed corn funding, to small civil society organisations, voluntary organisations that are working together, working in partnership to support a range of different health and social welfare objectives in the BEARR region. So we've been doing this for quite a number of years. Every year we choose a new theme, so we focus on something a bit different every time. Our common thread, or our two common threads that run through all of that, are firstly the focus on health and welfare. So that's what we want our funding to go to, things that will make a difference to health and welfare at community level across the BEARR region. And the second thread that really runs through it is this point about partnership, working together with others, networking, and trying to develop ideas that might be adapted and adopted elsewhere and might be taken forward. So we've been running this for some time. Last year, we had quite a few applications, so we received 227 applications last year from across the region, applications from every country in the region. And out of that, we awarded 15 grants. That might seem like a small number of grants relative to the total number of applications, and I guess it is. The reason we only award 15 is because that's the funding that we have available. If we had more money, we would issue more grants. So we're very much keen to see applications come forward. We're very keen to issue the money, and we're keen to give it to the right projects. It's funding that constrains us, not our keenness to engage and our keenness to get applications coming forward. I should say, in case you're wondering, that all of the money that underpins the grant scheme that we distribute comes from voluntary and charitable contributions from a range of sources. None of that money is government money of any government sort. That's all from individuals and charitable trusts giving the money freely to us to do what we want with it in support of our objectives. So this year, our small grant scheme is focused on two things. And I said just now that we focus on a different theme every year. Our primary focus this year is on projects that propose ways of improving the social welfare of migrant workers and the well-being of their families. Why have we come up with that theme? Partly because of the number of migrant workers that there are across the region, both in respect of migrant workers who have migrated to a country, or in respect of families of migrant workers who may be left behind in the country that they originally came from. Over the past couple of years, of course, everything, all our lives have been disrupted by COVID, in many cases to a great extent, in some cases to a lesser one. And our perception is that migrant workers and their families are particularly impacted by that, not being able to return home and visit family, being stuck in the country where they may have only intended to be for a certain period of time, and so on. So we're interested in exploring some of those issues. That theme could cover a whole range of things, and when we open the grant scheme, we don't prejudge what might come forward. So we have a general theme, but those community organisations, those CSOs that are out there on the ground are the experts in this. So we're interested in finding out what projects you want to propose, because you'll have the knowledge and the insight. So it could cover a range of activities. Our maximum grant for that is £3,000, so $5,000 or thereabouts. Relatively small, but I'll come on to that in a bit. We also have a second strand of funding this year, which is in the column on the right, the B grant, which is really about activities that will support the welfare and the well-being of the staff of existing organisations and their volunteers. And this is very much about improving the resilience of CSOs across the region. That strand that we've branded as B is only open to organisations that have previously received BEARR Trust money. And the reason for that is that we want to introduce that strand to go back to people that we've worked with before to say, actually, if you had a bit of funding, how could you use that to improve your own organisation's sustainability and resilience? So 2 strands, one open to everybody, focused on social welfare of migrant workers and their families. The second strand only open to previous grantees, focused on their own organisational resilience. You can apply to both, one or the other, but the second one is only open to previous grantees. And the closing date for this, which is kind of the important bit, if you haven't picked it up from the website already, is Friday the 18th of February at midnight London time. So that's really important. We can't accept applications that are later than that, because we have quite a tight timetable for processing them. So please bear that deadline in mind as you're preparing your application. So what are we interested in funding? I've told you what the themes are, but what are we actually interested in all this? The first thing is we're quite interested in looking at projects that take an imaginative or an unusual approach, an innovative approach to addressing some of the problems that are inherent in our theme, so migrant workers in this case. It might be that you have a really good project that has been running before, maybe isn't taking a particularly unusual approach, but is looking to expand or just do something slightly different, incrementally different. That's okay. We'd consider that. Sometimes those are really good projects and we don't want to rule those out. But we do ask a question on the application form about what is it about your project that's new or innovative or particularly interesting. And we'd really like you to answer that if you can, because there's learning that we can gain from that, and that's the sort of thing we'd like to fund. As I said before, we're really interested in projects that work in partnership with others. So we do prefer to fund organisations that are working together with another organisation and that can extend collaboration, and that's the kind of thing that we look for. And within all of that, we're really wanting to support organisations that are either new or newish, and certainly quite small, and community-based. That's our real focus. And we want to support projects that can learn from other people and from which other people can learn from, build those networks and so on. So that's what we're interested in. And of course, we're also interested in this second strand around supporting the resilience of those organisations we've supported previously. So there are a few criteria which you'll see in detail on the application form and the guidance. And if you haven't looked at the guidance in the application form, then I'd really encourage you to look at the guidance notes, because they're really good and they're really helpful, and we think they're really clear. So have a good look at those. Please follow the guidance, because we've tried not to write anything that's not necessary. So if we've said it, then that's because we think it's quite important. So we've tried to keep it simple and keep it clear. A couple of things just to mention. Please don't give us any more than 4 pages per grant application. So we've got 3 pages for the application itself in both cases, both strands, and then 1 page for the budget, or if you want to submit that as an Excel spreadsheet, that's fine too. But please don't give us any more than that. The reason for that isn't because we're not interested. I think we'd be really interested in more information. But the reason we don't want it is because we get sort of 200, 300 applications, and there's only a few of us to read it. So we need to go through it quite quickly. So it's really a time thing for us. Keeping it concise actually is really important. And don't forget, you can apply for one of those grant strands or both of them, provided you're eligible for the second. If that's not clear, and I appreciate it might not necessarily be, ask a question or come back to us. So what are we looking for in all of this, apart from all of that? It's some things that, from an assessor's point of view, when we get all of these applications, this is what we really look for. We really want applications that address this year's theme. Every year we will get some applications that don't really address the theme, and what they're addressing is the theme from last year or the year before, or something else that they'd like to do, which might be a really good project, but isn't really addressing what we're asking for. If you don't think that your project is going to support the welfare of migrant labour and their families, please don't apply for something else, because we will get lots of applications that will meet that objective. So we won't be able to consider applications that don't meet the theme. Even if it's a really good project, we won't be able to do anything with it. If you are in that position, don't be disheartened. There'll be another round next year, and the round next year might be for something that's much more appropriate and you can apply for. But don't submit an application that doesn't meet the theme, because it won't help. We want to know that the contribution that BEARR make will make a real difference. So that's really why we want to support small and new organisations. There will be organisations out there that receive lots of different types of grant funding from different organisations. And in that context, £3,000 isn't going to make a big difference to that organisation or to that project. So we probably don't really want to fund that, because actually those organisations have got enough money and they probably want bigger funders than the small amounts that we can give. So we want to focus our money on where it can really make a difference with those smaller organisations. I mentioned the point about trying to do something that's new or imaginative. So we bear that in mind, and really we want evidence that you're working in partnership as well. And we do ask on the form about that. We do want some other funding alongside BEARR Trust money. So the £3,000 up to £3,000 that we could provide in support of projects to support welfare of migrant workers. We won't 100% fund a project. We will only fund up to 50% of the project cost. So you need to find the other 50% yourselves. That might be from your own funding, your own money that you've got yourselves. It might be from other organisations that you've applied to. The reason that we do that is because we are looking for that partnership element, and actually having other funders involved strengthens that. And we're also looking for sustainability as well. And generally projects are more sustainable if you've got a couple of other people alongside you, different sources of funding, more people working together. So that's why we try not to 100% fund. Crucially, what we really want you to do in the application is be really clear about what you're going to do. who's going to benefit and why you're doing it. There's not much space to write, so keep it simple. The application doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes things get complicated, and I do this all the time at work when I'm trying to work something out. Sometimes things become complicated because actually it's not very clear what the thing was in the first place. So keep it simple, be clear about what you're going to do, who's going to benefit, who's this for, why you're doing it. And then we want to know that it's deliverable. So we'd normally expect projects to be delivered within 6 months of the application being granted. Sometimes there's a bit of flexibility on that, so don't worry about that. But usually we want it to be delivered reasonably promptly. And that's why the budget's quite important. So try and be clear in the budget what the money's actually going to be spent on, so we can see that it's viable and it's deliverable. So finally, before we move on, we really want projects to be successful. So we have criteria, we have pro formas, we have rules and things because we need that to make decisions. But when we assess projects, our starting point is which of these projects can we fund? Which of these projects can we bring forward? And we'll try and we think from that point of perspective. We're not thinking about who can we rule out and what have people got wrong or done wrong. We want projects to be successful, and we start from that point. And we want to learn from those projects as well, and that's really important. So when you get your grant, we will monitor that, but we're not well, we are interested in, but we're not just interested in what outputs you've achieved. So what's more important to us is what's the project really benefited? What have you learned from it? How can this be taken forward? And that's more important to us than exactly how many people did you get through the door in delivering this scheme. That's what where we want to achieve. As I mentioned, the guidance is quite clear, we think. But what we're really interested in is understanding the project. So think about when you're doing it, think about how you explain the project. I know there are professional bid writers and people out there, and there are some people who are really good at writing super application forms. We tend to sort of try and look past that. So we would rather an application that might not be perfectly written, but that's actually quite clear about what they want and it's clear who's going to benefit. We'd prefer that than an application that perhaps says in sort of beautiful English exactly what the strategy is, but doesn't really get to the heart of what's the point of this project. So bear that in mind. We're not worried about exact language and wording and whether you've cited every sort of bit of policy or whatever. We're interested in the project. And just at the end, as I said, we can only fund a limited number of projects because that's what our money amounts to. So we've only got so much money. We try and fund as many as we can within the budget, but don't be discouraged if we can't fund you. If you want to know more, please do ask any questions in the chat. Any questions that you think of now, just chuck them in the chat and we can keep monitoring them. And indeed, any questions for our next speakers, again, put those in the chat and we can check them. Feel free to post questions in English or in Russian, and we'll monitor that now. All the guidance is on the website. If you do have any questions, please contact Anna. Anna's here on this call as well, and Anna will answer some of the questions that you put in the chat. So contact Anna if you've got any questions, and you can contact her in English, Russian, or Ukrainian. All of that's all very welcome. So anything that's not clear, just shout, and we'll try and answer.